Welcome back, dear participants. We will be starting the second session of the day. It will be on the topic of CCUS and finance. The talk will be delivered to us by Mr. Darshak Mehta. Dr. Darshak Mehta is a consultant in sustainable development and climate change development in Asian Development Bank. Dr. Mehta has more than 25 years of experience in energy and climate change sector, covering renewable energy, energy efficiency, climate finance, and carbon capture, utilization, and storage. He is also a part of the CDM accreditation team with the UNFCCC. So with this very short introduction, sir, we warmly welcome you to the ITEC program, and you can start your presentation, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. So today I've gone through the syllabus that has been given to you, and it's a very extensive discussion that you have had on this. And it has been also seen that you have done fairly good amount of discussion on different parts of CCUS also, and you will be looking more at how to finance CCUS. So my today's talk is going to be more on summing up various things that have been done, telling you exactly how it has been put up in the context of finance, and letting you all know as to what is the next step onto how things are done in practical way. So can you hold for a second? Sorry, I'm working from home. I need something, and I said, just a second, please. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. So, okay, so let's start the discussion now. The flow of the presentation is what is CCUS, why CCUS, elements of CCUS capture, CO2 utilization avenues, CO2 storage, common CO2 infrastructure, and CCUS finance. Some of these things I know that they have been covered in detail during earlier lectures, but it will be good to have some real life examples and discuss as to how various entities and various countries are taking this CCUS in their larger energy planning, as well as fitting it into their discussions regarding regarding carbon neutrality. So let's try to work it out now. What is CCUS? So basically, it's carbon dioxide, CO2 capture, CO2 utilization, and CO2 storage. These are the four fundamental elements within which we will be working, and we will be deciding as to what are the next things onto this. Okay, so what is the importance of CCS? Here you are able to see the projections of IEA between 2020 to 2070 and various parts of carbon neutrality and how the carbon neutrality can be achieved by 2070, which incidentally is also the time when India itself has committed itself to be carbon neutral. So in this scenario of IEA, as you see, initially CCS is practically zero, and it tends to increase slowly. And over the period of time, it has a sizable share, one of the largest decarbonization tool that is available amongst hydrogen, bioenergy, renewables, technology performance, and fuel shift. All these things put together, one of the largest cumulative share is coming to CCUS. So energy efficiency, of course, plays a major vital role over there, and electrification. But even in electrification, there is a role for CCUS to play. There is a role for renewables to play. So That is the overall way how you see it and why you are looking at CCUS as a technology. Now, coming to the next, what are the effects of CCUS? And probably this is something which will be linking to the finance aspects of CCUS as to why you need to have a specific kind of finance in terms of CCUS. What is the how CCUS looks at? Is seen is it is almost 90% of CO2 emission is captured when CCS is used, carbon capture, utilization and storage. The present day technologies are already at a state of art is that 90% of CO2 emission can be captured through commercially available CO2 capture technologies. But it increases the parasitic load because there are a lot of, it's a chemical process which is prevailing right now. It is called amine-based chemical process. And in that amine-based chemical process, you are going to have a lot of pumps, heating will be involved. Then there will be also other systems involved which will be consuming electricity. So that increases the parasitic load on the system, just like a power plant system is having its own power plant system is having its own what do you call cooling towers. It is having its own pumps, boiler feed pumps, etc. Similar to that parasitic load, additional loads of pumps and cooling, etc., will be added when, say, current amine-based power is amine-based systems are involved. So, in those things, what you can try to do is that the calculation. The other day we were talking to Indonesia as to when they are planning to do CCS based power plants. We were trying to understand as to what is it that it is implying on the cost and how they are going to meet it. When we talked to them, and the reply came that when they are going to apply CCS, the cost of power is going to increase by almost 50%. Now that is a very, very substantial amount of energy consumption and parasitic load that you are going to have on the project. And that is why the finance part or how to manage the cost of CCS becomes a very, very important thing. And that is one of the fundamental reasons why instead of storage, people will be more inclined to go for utilization, because it has utilized CO2 utilization has got its own value to it. It has additional income stream and probably it will cover part of this system. That is one of the reasons why you need to be very careful when you are trying to see what is the CCUS, what is happening at CCUS, and each time you are going to work with the CCUS, you need to know what is the state of art of the technology. The reason being that this is a very much some field which is developing. There are a lot of issues which are coming up. We will, as we go down the line, we'll find out as to what is the say CCUS and is comprising of. So the capture technologies, as we have said, are partly amine based. Then there are technologies which are adsorption based. Chemical adsorption is involved. Chemical looping is involved. Membrane based CO2 capture is involved. Electrochemical, that is the newer, just like electrostatic precipitators are there. There are newer technologies which are developed by MIT, and they are working on electrochemical aspects of it. Of course, some European countries are also using it. And of course, there is the new kid in the block, which is direct air capture. Honestly, personally, I'm not so much a fan of that, but that is something that has caught eye of the people, and everybody is very much excited. Recently, Elon Musk has declared $100 million just for this direct air capture technology. So that's it. But when you are going to decide CO2 capture technologies, what are the elements which you will be keeping in mind when you are trying to decide a capture technology? So while design, one is you will be having, say, what is the nature of industry? It can be power plant, it can be steel, it can be cement, petrochemical, glass. These are the types of industries, and depending upon the characteristics of these industries, you may have to work on that. The second is volume of carbon dioxide. The amount of, because with the different company, different places, there are different volumes of carbon dioxide which will be involved. Say per ton of CO2, which is per ton of megawatt hour that is produced. You will be having, say, something like depending upon what is the plant, in case of, say, gas-based power plants, it is going to be 0.5 ton of CO2 per megawatt hour. In case of coal-fired power plants, it is going to be 0.7 to 0.8, and so on. So that is the kind of range that you are talking about. Then concentration of CO2. Now, this is also something which determines different characteristics. There is 4% CCGT, 4% CO2 concentration is there when it is combined cycle gas turbine. 13% concentration of CO2 when it is coal based. In a cement plant, the CO2 comes out at almost 20% out of cement kiln. Then petrochemicals, there are times when the CO2 concentration in certain plants is almost 90% or 95%. So this is the different level of CO2 concentration and at which you are playing, and depending upon these concentrations, your size of the plant, complexity of the plant, etc., and the final product that you are going to decide, that everything will be decided on that. One of the most important thing to be considered in the while deciding the CO2 capture plant design is to understand what is the purity of what is the purity in terms of CO2 not only in terms of CO2 concentration, but in terms of impurity of other gases, etc. So SOx, NOx, particulate matter, all these things, they are going to affect your what is going to be your how it is going to be affecting the capture. Because say when amine based captures are concerned, your SOx, NOx have to be eliminated, and that itself is a big issue. It will require a lot of huge amount of capital investment. Although SOx now legally most of we are required to say remove SOx, NOx from the any flue gas stream, but that is still not a prevailing practice in countries like say India, Indonesia, even to some extent places like Australia. So although this is an added advantage, it is going to put an additional strain on when you are going to design a plant as such. So one has to be very careful while assigning and deciding what is the finance and how you are going to project to your management as to what is going to be the cost of CO2 capture. Because flue gas cleaning, say SOx NOx cleaning, is going to form a very substantial part of your CO2 capture system. So that should be allocated towards the towards the air purification and not be put up to the GHG side. This is one of the ways of designing your finances to how to allocate your financing system. The other thing is what is going to be intended use of CO2, and based on that the purification of your CO2 system will be decided. CO2 can be used for say food grade CO2, it can be used for enhanced oil recovery. All these places the purification requirement of CO2 is going to be different, and your capital expenditure and operating expenditure will be different in that kind of fashion. So now when it comes to CO2 usage, what are the options you are having? There are n number of unlimited options almost, you can say. But when you are going to explore all these options, one of the fundamental things that one needs to look at is what is the chemistry behind it? What is the thermodynamics behind it? Whether, because say anything is possible when, as far as for me being mechanical engineer, I have very simple notion of how CCS or CO2 utilization can be done. For me, it is ultimately a high, you need to convert anything into hydrocarbons, say in plastic or fuel or something. If you want to do that, you in case of hydrocarbon, you have CH and O. So it is only H that is missing, and all you need to do is add H, right? So hydrogen added, and that is what it does. That is all it will create, and then you can go for all the multiple permutation and combination of various chemicals. But while doing that, the chemical engineering aspect or chemical aspect or thermodynamic aspect will be that it will be requiring that much of additional energy. Each time you are going to add hydrogen to that CO2 structure, it is going to affect the hydrogen production itself, is going to catch the amount of thing. So let's have a brief overview as to what are the different things that you can do. Okay, and this is a very well-known figure, but let's go through. There are some direct uses of CO2. One is fire extinguishing, which is all you need is CO2 and you can spread CO2. Second is CO2 to be used as supercritical CO2, and supercritical CO2 is a solvent which can be reused, and it can have huge implications into textile industry. It will practically eliminate your water. But then again, that is not a very big CO2 usage. I mean, in terms of consuming CO2, it is very, very little that can be done. But that's a very interesting thing. Supercritical CO2 can also be used in power plants instead of steam, and that is going to increase your power plant efficiency. Again, that is something which is not going to take a big amount of chunk of CO2 which is emitted. But then one of the most exciting thing about CO2 is CO2 mineralization to make cement, cement concrete like things. So that is one of the things. You can make CO2 to chemicals, which can be methanol, urea, carbon monoxide, methane, liquid. So it is ultimately coming to liquid fuel, fertilizer, or secondary fuels. Depending on, we will be seeing a case study a little bit later, which will give you some understanding. Refrigerant is another usage wherein dry ice can be made. This is also, so it is, this is whole thing is food grade CO2. We will be seeing a case study on that also. Then miscellaneous thing is CO2 metal in CO2 casting is there, aerosol is there, dry ice, etc., etc. Different things are there. Algae is another usage of CO2, which can be later on converted into fluid, which can act as a petroleum itself, and then you can go on to make different chemicals, etc. out of that. Food grade CO2, and of course the current flavor of the month is basically in oil and gas sector, which is enhanced oil recovery, enhanced gas recovery, enhanced coal bed methane recovery. That is one of the most important thing. It can take up a huge amount of CO2 and it can work for you. Now, after having a very broad overview as to what are the CO2 utilization avenues, let's go to the next step on to the utilization thing. So estimation of CO2 storage. This is one of the very, very important aspect of CO2 storage, because you need to know geology, and there are different avenues for you to save CO2. It can be in saline aquifers, it can be in oil reservoir, gas reservoirs, coal bed methane, geothermal reservoirs, etc. It can be done. But saline aquifer is one of the most important form of CO2 storage. It's its contribution to overall CO2 storage scenario is more than 90-95%, depending upon different places. I mean, let's go a little bit further to see as to what is the potential of CO2 storage, say in India, because and that is estimated according to a very latest report that has come recently. About 400 to 600 gigatons of CO2 can be stored in India overall, the known reserve. And out of that, deep saline aquifer is taking almost 291 gigatons, which is huge. Next comes basalt, and thereafter a few other things are there. So let's try to understand this. So these are the different technical papers, say of 2005, 6, 8, 17, which has put different numbers for CO2 storage potential. And if you see, the numbers vary from as low as 105 to 572 to 600, 700. So huge variation is there in these numbers, and it is important to know as to why and what are the ways in which these numbers are varying, why that is happening. And it is an important aspect for you to understand as to what is the CO2 storage potential in your specific country. So these numbers and these figures, these are coming from a recent paper by from a professor in IIT Bombay for India, and it has given a theoretical capacity, which is the volumetric limit of the storage, as 3,400 gigatons. That is almost how much it is theoretically possible. But then they try to understand as to what is the storage efficiency coefficients they are possible, because and that has to be applied. So when storage efficiency coefficients are used, this 3,400 reduces to 2,000. And then there are certain, say, legal aspects are there. Certain places you cannot store CO2, or the pipeline is not capable of carrying the CO2 to those places, etc. are there. So in such circumstances, it has gone down to 1,200. And finally, if you have seen the previous slide, it is almost coming to 700 to 400 tons of CO2. So CO2 storage potential has to be done. It's a very lengthy exercise, and one needs to carry out very carefully and decide as to what is it, what stage that those numbers are coming out. Again, this is the broader from the same paper. I'm just trying to show you different places where CO2 can be stored. And what are the aspects? One is, say, this orange part is enhanced oil recovery. ECBM in coal beds, it is almost this green part is there, and in saline aquifers, it is all the rest of the CO2 storage potentials are there. Part of it is in offshore, or part of it is onshore, and it can, and a lot of storage potential is yet to be assessed and understood, as can be seen from this. Now, one of the important thing when we are considering financing of CO2 CCS, the important part is that so far most of the projects have been taken up as an individual project. There is a standalone project that is done by, say, in Canada. Another standalone small project is done, say, in Australia, and that is there, which is it is at a stage of proof of concept kind of thing, wherein once it is established that a laboratory scale a project can be done, whether the project can be done at a commercial level, that testing is still being done. But going forward, what is likely to happen is there will be a number of such projects. So all these projects will be having their own CO2 capture system, which is going to be independent and which is going to be standalone. That element is there. But there is a potential when there is a cluster of industries around in some place. That is the time when you can try to integrate all the CO2 carrying pipeline and CO2 injection infrastructure as a common thing. And that way, instead of putting all individual pipelines, you can have your own common CO2 carrying pipeline and injection infrastructure. So it will be working almost like a utility, like water utility or electricity utility. You will be taking the CO2 together, say like you have a common generating system. In this case, it is going to be distributed generation system, which will be getting together in a common distribution line, which will collect it. Basically, you shouldn't be saying distribution line, but collection line. And then it will go into main chunk of transmission line. This is a concept which has been coming up in a big way. The Oil and Gas Climate Initiative has already identified 8 such projects across the world. And the list is given over here. They call it as Kickstarter hubs. The link and everything is given over here. The first hub is at net zero TC Day in the UK, and it is likely to consume almost 10 million tons of CO2. Then another is in Norway, which is 5 million tons of CO2. Then Rotterdam, it is 10 million tons of CO2. In China, they have a collective capacity of 3 million tons of CO2, and so on and forth. Similarly, there is another project that is coming up in Australia. Okay, Indonesia is also working very closely and developing this kind of hub and spoke structure. So the idea, this is something which is because now CO2 capture is no longer a possibility that you should be thinking as in terms of say technical viability. Technical viability might be an issue, but feasibility is not an issue. So to make the projects more feasible and economically and financially more feasible, it is necessary to give them enabling infrastructure. Let's try to see what are the considerations when common CO2 infrastructure projects are being developed. One is you have to see the site, which should be say nearer to the point of injection and point of collection, point source of CO2 emission, that should be there. Longer term planning, say what are the new projects which are going to come up, what are the future expansion issues. Then the next issue is business model, whether it is going to be a public, just like an electrical utility, whether it is going to be a public utility or it is going to be private plant or it is going to be PPP, public private partnership. All those things one may have to consider. And of course, from business perspective, what should be the capital structure or how the new generation will be there? What is the cost which will be acceptable to the say industry which is going to inject it and which is going to do it? Because see, this CCS is actually a lot like say when you are, it is like a nuclear power plant. Basically, when you are having nuclear waste, it is once the waste is generated, it is not for today, it is going to be there for hundreds and thousands of years to come. So same is the case with CCS. Once it is stored, the CO2 is captured and stored in a place, just like oil and gas, which is not brought out, it is going to be there for hundreds and thousands of years. Because once CO2 is injected, it is ideally going to be converted into absorbed into the seams, and over a longer period of time, it is going to be converted from CO2 to say calcium, etc., and small carbonization take place, and that is what it is going to happen. But till that point of time, there is the responsibility of an operator, at least for say 30 to 40 years from the time that the CO2 has been injected, to see that the CO2 is stored, it is monitored, and because there is the issue of carbon credits also, so it has to be ensured that CO2 has not leaked back into the environment. So these are the additional expenses that you will have to consider if you are considering CO2 storage system. So that's the finance aspect of CO2 storage. Now let's try to understand as through one of the, because overall your course is to looking at say net zero. In context of net zero, what is going to be the role of CCS. So I've just taken a case study from a paper which has seen what will be the role of CCS in making the Singapore a carbon neutral country or net zero. So they have considered a time limit up to 2080, from 2020 to 2080. And if you see different things, almost 50 to 60% of their almost 60% of their CO2 emission reduction is attributed to CCS. Now it can be different in different countries. Then refining hydrogen production, EV production of introduction of EV, hydrogen, biofuel, etc. They are also playing a role, but ultimately the major part is going to come through CCS. Now, how did they do it? What they have done is they have tried to map out as to this is Singapore, and around Singapore they have seen that they have because Singapore has got its own very small footprint, and they are surrounded by giant countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, and they have next door something like Thailand, etc. So they have tried to see that how are these, especially Malaysia and Indonesia, they are oil and gas producing countries. So what are the avenues for them if they are not able to inject it them by themselves? How they can make use of these countries? So they have tried to identify as to what is these red things are oil and gas. Then this red and green, they are red is only gas. Green and red are the countries. Oil and gas, both the things are there. Then on green is only oil, and the other rest is basing. So these are the places where they can inject CO2. And then they have tried to work out for what are the decarbonization strategy for each of these sectors. So they have, in case of CCS, they are saying what is the post-combustion technology and CO2 capture in a certain Jurgon Island. That is what they have said. Then CO2 has to be transported, and CO2 has to be stored through regional CCS corridor. That is the concept they have developed. Then when it comes to hydrogen, because that is one of the major things that is coming up. Hydrogen production, as of today, hydrogen production is best done, or the most cost effective way of production of hydrogen is through SMR and CCS. The green hydrogen is supposed to be the ideal thing, but then that is going to cost today, and today's price it is going to be 2 to 3 times more. So when they are going to use hydrogen, again they are going to end up with CCS. Refining, again they are going to use CCS. Transport, it may or may not have, but that's how they are going to work it out. Now, looking at this whole overall system and these pathways, they've tried to conceptualize as to how to work on CCS. So current system is, there is a refinery, there is a petrochemical plant, there is a natural gas combined cycle power plant, which is making certain chemicals, and the end usage electricity or energy is going to the customers. But each time there is, if you see this red line, it is the CO2 which is being emitted. So this CO2 emission is taking place. However, once they go to the new system, future system, what they are going to do is they are going to use this hub and spoke model that we discussed earlier. And there is a separate CO2 stream which is being taken out, and from each of this they are put together, and a centralized CO2 carbon capture system itself, they are making it centralized. So they have gone one step ahead, since probably everything is very close together. They are taking all the flue gas together, taking it to a centralized post combustion CO2 capture system, like say the central water cleaning system, central water cleaning system we are having. Similarly, this is flue gas cleaning system, and they are taking CO2 out. So that's the whole system. So when you are going to see the development of a new industrial park or new energy system in your country, this is the way you may have to do a CCS readiness study itself. So, I mean, while working at ADB, we have tried to come up with a whole new small system, booklet on how CCS readiness can be incorporated in the projects, and say for steel projects or cement sector, etc., etc. So I'll give you the link later on, and that's something which is going to be very useful to you. Now, I'll take you to some of the case studies that we have done as part of my ADB assignment. This is a project wherein we saw a refinery sector in India. It is actually a petrochemical sector. So in petrochemicals, we had a case in India wherein there was an MEG plant, from where almost 90% pure CO2 was available and was being emitted. So if you read through this link, if you go through this link, you will be able to access the whole report. I mean, basically it's not the whole report, but the summary of the report, because of the confidentiality issues, we were not able to put up everything what was discussed in that report. But essentially what had happened is that CO2 was more than 90% pure. It had no practical impurity. So all you had to do is capture that CO2 and convert it into food grade CO2. So if you see the economics
Сергей
of
Васильевич,
it, sorry.
Да, я хотел просто вот добавить, что если в будущем мы хотим тесно сотрудничать, у нас при конфедерации есть бизнес-консалтинговая компания. Это наша дочерняя компания, бизнес-консалтинг. Они могли бы вам помочь по распространению этой информации полезной среди наших бизнесменов и как бы проследить ситуацию в дальнейшем процессе. И тесно сотрудничать с представительством вашим, как Татарстана или Азербайджане. Вот это, я думаю, что надо более тесно контактировать с этим представительством, потому что хотя бы в будущем, вот в ближайшем будущем, давайте организуем.
Sorry, is there any issue over here? Sorry, I wasn't able to understand. Am I audible or not yet?
Yes, sir, you're audible. I think so. By mistake, he has unmuted his mic.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Okay. So, going back to that case study, the capital cost of this project was about $27 million. So, and with $27 million, they were able to capture 250 tons of CO2 per day, food grade CO2 per day. And overall, it was able to save almost 75,000 tons of CO2 per annum. I mean, see, if you see really, it is 250 tons of CO2 is converted into food grade CO2, but there is also some inherent emissions because of the capture technology, etc., and different loads that were there. So considering everything, it is going to save you about 75,000 tons of CO2. That's the kind of thing. There is also a second case study that I would like to share with you. This was again a pre-feasibility study for carbon capture and utilization in cement industry of India. Now, this was a very interesting thing. It is a cement plant which is emitting about 1.5 million tons of CO2 per annum. So the system was, because it is going to be one of the first of a kind system, what was done was the first whole market analysis was done for different type of projects. I can share that with you later. We can discuss as based upon availability of the time. We can try to have a look at it. So what was happening is here, 500,000 tons of CO2 was supposed to be captured. From that, about 680,000 tons of urea was being made. and it is going to make about 140, it is going to save about 140,000 tons of CO2 per year. But that is under a business as usual case when you are using the existing infrastructure and when you are not using any additional measures. When you put up additional measures like using green CO2, green ammonia, because one of the fundamental, apart from once CO2 is captured, it has to be blended with ammonia, and that ammonia itself is having its own carbon footprint. But if that ammonia is, say, blue ammonia or ammonia which is not having its own carbon footprint, what is going to happen is, instead of 140,000 and there is another, of course, emission that is coming from the combustion of coal within that cement kiln. If you are going to use, say, biomass, and you are going to use blue ammonia, if you are going to do all those things, then you, instead of 140,000 tons of CO2, you will be able to save 1.4 million tons of CO2. Now, when you are going for the base case, when just 140,000 tons of CO2 is being saved, the project cost is of the order of say about 360,000, 60 million US dollars. But when you are going, when all the other mitigation measures are applied, the cost of power plant increase, cost of the whole project goes to almost $2.3 billion. So there is a huge amount of CO2 increase. But say, let's come to so this is one of the things that you may want to have a look at it when you have time, when you can access this project. And the break even for this project was at 325 US dollar per ton of urea. Why it is very important to know what is the selling prices? Because in case of India, the selling price of India, because of the various policies of the government, it was of order of 270,000. So there is a huge viability gap funding that was required to fill in this gap. However, this was the time when the project was done. After 2 to 3 months, there was a rise in the cost of urea, selling price of urea, international selling price, and that selling price turned out to be 450,000 US dollar per ton. So that's a huge amount. The project suddenly becomes very profitable. Moreover, as I've said, the availability of carbon dioxide in that plant at that point of time was just about 0.5 million tons. 1.5 million ton, out of which we take to just 0.5 million ton. But if the plant was designed further and made, say, 1 million tons of capture of CO2 was done, or 1.5 million, suddenly the reduction in capital cost came by, say, 25%. And those kind of things, things will be affecting again the say, your cost of the project. And so that is something you need to know. But the example actually tells you that when we are in a very romantic situation of getting into, say, carbon neutrality and etc., at that point of time, somehow you have to be very mindful of the fact that yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so when that is happening, you have to be very careful with the economics of scale, the market prices, all those things need to be seen in a very closely before you design a plant. And when you want to, when the CO2 neutrality is being discussed, it doesn't come free. It has got a cost. Say, like here in this case, say from the cost of about, say, $360 million, it goes to up to over almost $2.3 billion. So carbon neutrality doesn't come free. It has its cost, and you need to take into account those issues. Okay, let's see. This is just something I'm trying to give you as an example or detailed case studies that you may want to have at a later stage. So please have a look at it. This was again a very ready-made, ready-made project wherein there are a lot of gas processing complexes. As part of when natural gas comes out of the field, it has different types of CO2 concentration. Say some fields are having say as high as 70% CO2 along with methane. Some places it comes hardly to 2-3%. And the pipeline quality of methane that we need is of order of say hardly 2% is say 90 more than 95%, 90, 95, 98%. So these kind of gas, when you have very pure project, you can directly take it and pump it with just screening and removing some particular matters, and that's how you can link it. But if it is not there, and say there is trace of sulfur in it and some other gases are there, that time the gas has to be purified. And that such kind of streams in say gas processing complexes, a lot of your participants, you might be coming from countries which are having gas production, and in those places you can actually take pure CO2 stream out of the gas, and you can actually use it in your country for different type of things, and the CO2 can be recycled and put it back. That CO2 so far has been only vented into the air, but hence, but it have, if you want to decarbonize your gas production, because then you have to use this, and this CO2 availability in gas processing complexes is a very is a very one of the lowest hanging fruits that you can have. These are some of the other projects you can review and have a look at it from ADB's stable, and you feel free to contact me in case you want these reports, you want to see it. I can share all the links with you. Then again, when you are trying to work on CCUS, there is decarbonization roadmaps and other things you can try to do. This is something ADB has done for China, and you can try to have a look at it. And once the roadmap is done at a national level, there will be a need that this national level roadmap will percolate down national level private sector country. Say like today's news in India is that all the oil and gas companies of India, their public sector oil and gas companies, they have been asked to set up their own carbon neutrality targets. So BPCL, one of the companies, has set the target as 2040. Another private Indian company has set up Reliance has set up a target of 2035 for carbon neutrality. So at some point of time, once things have been done at a macro level, it has to come down and boil down at a company level, and that you have to see it in a very carefully, and then the individual financing will have to be carried out. Now comes the CCS finance. So how are the different ways in which you can do the financing of CCUS? One is say at different places you need. One is when you want to do financing of CCUS. First thing is you will have to do say promotion of it, awareness raising, etc. For that, you may have help from say number of international organizations like ADB, World Bank, bilateral cooperations like say countries like US, UK, Australia. They can help you bilaterally. International organizations like IEA, they can help you with the experts. OGCI, which I mentioned with you earlier, that can give you another assistance in designing the system. Similarly, same actors will be used and they will be helpful to you when it comes to policy related support. So ADB or World Bank, etc., they will be there. Then, just as I showed you earlier, when you want to do pre-feasibility report or feasibility report or front-end design engineering, there is a possibility that you can have financing from multilateral development financial institutes. There will be pilot or demonstration project. This is the place from where probably along with the multilateral and bilateral organizations, this where you can have additional funding, you can explore through say venture capitalists. They can come in, or financial institutes, they can come in. So say national level financial institute, these are the people who may come in, but of course national level financial institutes, they may not come so much early into the game. But when it comes to the next phase, when say commercial implementation, that is where the commercial banks will be coming in with the newer technologies. And this is the time when the first initial demonstration projects takes place. The support from multilateral financial institutes, they will start withdrawing from the whole process. They'll start going back. That's what it is going to happen. When again, there is also a need to have technology development. There are still entrepreneurs and technologists who are going to develop these technologies. So they will also need a lot of support, and the finance will be needed. So for them, again, venture capitalists, they will be the ones, or supplier credits, that is something, or buyer's credit, that is what they can have to finance their projects. The tools which are available to finance projects are, one is you can have grants. I mean, this is free grants which is generally available to say the national levels government companies and government research organizations. The grants are available from national level government agencies, or say different multilateral banks, etc. There can be say multilateral banks and national level banks, they can give you guarantees. These are the guarantees that can be given, and guarantees will ensure that the lower rate of interest can be there. Once a reputed company, financial institutes stand as a guarantee to the project, the risk elimination is taking place, and because that risk is eliminated, the interest rate for the lending companies, that will come down. So that is one of the things that will happen. Then there can be certain government subsidies in terms of say interest subsidy, but that is you can't expect it so much in developing countries. But yes, in some of the developed countries, you might be able to get it, or under some certain government schemes you may have it. Equity participation is possible. Say this is for through again financial institutes, and that can happen for the new companies which are developing the technologies. So they can go a number of rounds for taking the project for their as they grow, they will grow from one stage to the other. Each next round they keep on collecting more money. As the enterprise value comes in, that cost of selling the equity will try to come down. So that is one of the ways the companies can become bigger, and in the process they can also rope in say bigger companies. Say there are financing arms of bigger multinational companies like Mitsubishi, or say Mitsui, or say some other companies which are really looking at developing such technologies and having say in it. And so with the involvement of such large corporations within that smaller company's portfolio, they are also able to sell their products and their technologies in a better way. The other way CCS can be financed, of course, a commercial project is through debt. One huge thing that is going to come up now is through the carbon credits, because we can really hope now that modalities and procedures have been fixed up for as part of the Glasgow Climate Pact. There is the mechanism is going to start soon, which is going to give the most important thing people are looking at is the cost of carbon, value of the carbon. That will now we will be having. There are also, of course, other voluntary organizations which are going to have similar kind of thing. So they can be one of the important. That will be one of the very important tools. The thing that you need to keep in mind is what is the cost of CO2 today? Because today the carbon dioxide market, CO2 carbon market is really extremely fragmented. In some places, the cost of in voluntary market, it can be hardly $1 to $2 or $4 to $10. That is the maximum kind of the amount of money that you can expect from, say, voluntary carbon. Some places you may have, say, 30 to 40, and there are places within a small regulatory, some European countries or somewhere in other places, where the cost of the carbon dioxide per ton of CO2 goes as high as more than $100, $140. Now, if you see that whole gamut of the carbon price that is available to you, you will see that at different times, the different technologies becomes viable. Because today, say when you are going to talk of say direct air capture, the cost of CO2 capture is of order of $200, $150 to $300. So then, if you are just approaching voluntary market, probably it's not going to happen. You can't do that. So you have to go and try to see for some other revenue. But if you are looking placed in, say, somewhere in Norway or some Switzerland or somewhere where there is a really very high cost of carbon dioxide available, which is, say, of order of more than $100, then you are and then probably in certain situations it is possible that you will be able to approach the carbon market even today to get CC, to have CC, make CCS project viable. That is possible. So what kind of tools and where you are where you are sitting, that is all important. I mean, especially one of the things that I would like to bring to your notice is when you are approaching carbon markets, you really need to know what is the expense that you will be incurring for monitoring, verification of the project, and what is the revenue that you are going to realize through that. So your quantum of if you are saying, say, just saving 20, 30, I mean, you are just saving, say, 20 to 30,000 tons of CO2, then probably the carbon markets may or may not be very helpful. There are, of course, there are financing tools like JCM, joint crediting mechanism, which is being approached by countries like Indonesia. In such cases, the revenue or the assistance that comes in is actually that joint crediting mechanism is not supposed to be a tool of carbon market also. That is available only for the countries which are having bilateral with Japan. And in those places, the amount, the support to your project comes in form of so in form of technology transfer or capital subsidy or things like that. So it is a very different ball game altogether, and you have to then weigh your costs and benefits against what technology you are getting and what benefits you are getting. And in turn, these under this organization, certain part, maybe 100%, 50%, that kind of part of carbon credits will be taken back by these companies. So you need to try to understand as to what happens. One more tool that is available to project developer in developing countries is say government scheme. So like in case of US, there is a law called 45Q, which till now has been given $35 per ton of CO2, which is utilized and converted into some product. That is being given by the government, But if CO2 is stored, then the amount of money that is given is $50. And as the information that is available recently, there is going to be further amendment in this law, and the cost of CO2 is storage is likely to increase to $85. Now, today's CO2 capture cost is already of order of say $50 or 60 to $50 to $60. So in these circumstances, suddenly there is going to be a huge amount of surge in CCS in US because of this government scheme. And so that's one of the things that one needs to consider as when you are trying to understand what are the financing tools that are available to you. And I think that's all I have right now. I'm deliberately leaving some time for discussion with all of you and trying to understand exactly what is the how you feel. If you have any questions or what you need to know, I'll be trying to answer that. Honestly speaking, as of now, although my topic has been financing of CCS, there are very little avenues that are available to finance CCS unless there is a very strong policy support from your government. In a developing countries context, there is very little that is available for CCS. The CCS regulation is not there. CCS has not been accepted or identified as one of the CO2 emission, CO2 mitigation tool by most of the governments. Only till I'm talking about before this Glasgow, but hardly 10 to 11 countries have accepted in their NDC CCS as one of they've mentioned also CCS. And these countries are, one is only the Asian country is China, and the other countries are say Saudi Arabia and other Middle East countries who are actually having oil dependence or fossil fuel dependence. So that's how the financing is taking place. Some other very small amount of money is available with the multilateral banks, which is coming through their trust funds. So ADB and World Bank are having that kind of funding. So that is there. And the other tool can be carbon markets, which is really going to be very important. But then there is a long way to go. Why that is happening is because the carbon credits carbon market, it still has to develop further. But there have been a voluntary organizations which have come out with something, and they are trying to create a market for that. So that is what is happening, and you should really look out for that. Just a second, please. So that is what is happening. Another, not exactly financing tools, but indirect way of financing is something that I have missed out writing over here is the issue related to the carbon border tax that is being developed by EU. EU is having a scheme under wherein they are going to measure what is the carbon footprint of the products which are being imported into EU, and they are compared with the carbon footprint of the products which are being made in EU, and the difference will be taxed at the as per that carbon border tax. So any cement, steel, etc., these things which are being exported to EU, there is going to be a penalty if the carbon footprint of your product is more. So that's one of the things. Another interesting thing that has recently been announced as part of the COP is there is a signature by 5 countries, which includes India, UK, US, Canada, I believe, and Germany. These countries have got together and they are introducing low carbon purchase by the government. That is being promoted by these countries. There are 5 countries in it, and it's a UNDP promoted scheme why this is important is because out of all the it has been observed that out of all the products which are being which are being bought, all the cement or steel product, 40% of cement is being bought by the government, and 25% of steel is also bought by the government. So if government starts insisting in and trying to introduce CO2 as one of the criteria in their product, in their purchasing criteria, there is going to be a huge amount of impact. And probably this is right now, there are 5 countries. Over next 3 years, they are saying that about 10 countries will be involved in it, and probably a lot more countries will be there. There are a lot of technological developments which are taking place through industry association, say World Steel, Global Cement Concrete Association, etc. They are working in a very systematic way to explore newer technologies and work further. I think I'll stop over here for now, and I'll try to get back to all of you and try to get your feedback further on this, and happy to answer the questions. Hello?
Dear participants, if you have any query, you can ask it now.
Let's stop the share for now. और मैं ये जो घर है ना,
Participants, if there are any query, you can ask now. So Mr. Mehta, very warm welcome.
Thank you.
I was listening to your talk, and it was a very interesting talk, I must say. So there is a query in the chat box, and the question here is there any case study on CCS or CCUS in power sector?
Case study, probably, yeah, you can see the Boundary Dam project. That case study is very much available in international CCS it's ICCS UK, Canada-based organization. They have got that. So you may be, in fact, there are not only there is a case study of Boundary Dam project, but the Shand project, that case study is also available on that website. I can try to find out and I can share that link with you later. But you can look at International CCS Knowledge Center, Canada, the website. It is very much available there. Yeah. And there are some few other case studies, or you can say CCS readiness in study that we had tried to do. You can see it on ADB website. I'll share it with you. That was done for power plant in Bangladesh. It is a small case study, and overall philosophy as to how to do CCS case study. That can also be given over there.
Right. Is there any other query? Somebody was asking something on CCUS in the last class. You may put it up here. Let me see if it's there in the chat box. Can someone read out, because I don't have access. I can't see the chat box. the last question, which was there to the last speaker. He left. We received the question after he left. Anupam was here from Dalmia Cement. Shivangi, do you have access to that chat?
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
In some countries, mainly oil gas producers, the CCUS mechanism uses liquefied CO2. What's planned in your country?
Sorry.
Read it one more time,
Yeah,
Shivangi.
please.
Yes, ma'am. In some countries, mainly oil gas producers, the CCUS mechanism uses liquefied CO2. What's planned in your country?
So your here basically means India. So yeah, what's the plan for India?
Yeah, so for India, basically there is one EOR project that has been designed so far. I don't have the details of it. That is Indian Oil Corporation's Baroda Gujarat refinery. From there, they are going to capture CO2 and inject it about 100 kilometers down the line in Gandhar oil fields. So generally, it is not exactly liquefied, but I believe it is supercritical CO2 which is being transported and injected. And it really depends upon what is the environmental conditions in which it is being developed. So that economics needs to be seen. And so that will decide as to how, because the supercritical CO2s are something like 35 degrees centigrade or so, and then it has to be passed on. Depends on what is the end use. So injection, the oil field's own condition also will be affecting that thing, and what is the EOR condition. I'm not really an expert on that, so I would like to excuse me with that. But these are the considerations which will have to be seen when you are trying to inject CO2.
So there is one more question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Which of the CO2 capture technologies is more effective or the most used technology in India?
Yeah, so as of now, the most prevailing technology is amine-based CO2 capture, which is there, and that's most prevailing right now. Rest of the technologies, if you see the technology readiness level, they have not yet reached those levels. Amine-based technology is already used in a project in India, in southern India, which is to make carbonates, calcium carbonate basically. So that's prevailing not only in India but rest of the world also. Again, that also depends on what is the type of industry you are coming from, and that will help you to understand. Yeah, is there research conducted on what will happen with CCS area after a long time? Yeah, that's that's a as I told you during the talk also. This is like a nuclear waste basically. Nuclear waste is hundreds and thousands of years. That's what, and that's exactly what you need to treat CO2 stored also. Either you convert CO2 into mineralize and convert into a mineral product like cement. So then it becomes stable, and that's how it is stored. That doesn't need any monitoring probably, and it can go on. But if it is injected, then there are different laws and regulations which are coming into play, and about generally the trend is for about 30 to 40 years after injection. The operator has to take care of the project, and say for 30 to 40 years they have to see that there is no leakage take place and everything. There is insurance scheme which is there, etc. So those are the ways in which doing it. Yeah, insurance is something I missed out a while ago. Probably it is not exactly a financing tool, but that is a cost basically. And that is something that has to be considered and if you are really owning the plant and that is your business model. Yeah, if Mr. Badola was there, it would be, so Mr. Anupam Badola was there. He, in fact, the link I shared with you is for the same project, for the cement industry. Probably it will be very interesting to see that project on the web itself, and it will be it is one of the first of its kind study basically, and should be one. It's of course a pre-feasibility study, but fairly detailed. More than 200 pages are there. So different experts have been involved, and they worked on it. Should be good.
Yes, and it did acknowledge that the project that they did and they are working on is actually funded by ADB.
Right.
Yeah. So Badola, Anupam was here and he did talk about it.
He has been really a champion in a lot of ways, and has
Yes.
been looking after.
So in cement industry, I think it's the Dalmia Cement who has taken the kind of a lead or has been leapfrogging in this area of CCS,
right,
and CCUS basically.
Yeah.
In the country. And I think just to conclude, I mean, very nicely you gave the perspective, the bird's eye perspective of the CCUS, and from financing point of view, because see, the technology might be available, but the cost is the factor that I think is the bottleneck here, that who is going to fund these projects, because you are bringing in one additional step in this entire power generation process. And then as you somebody rightly mentioned out that if you're storing it, if you're going for geological storage, it's not just the storage, you have to keep monitoring, and then every step involves cost. So where from we are going to generate the fund, who is going to generate the fund, who all have the ownership of these technology, how this technology transfer will take place. All these things I think need to be discussed first. As far as technology is concerned, in readiness level, they stand at different readiness level because it's a newfound thing in a way, because we have only started talking about CCUS in last 15-20 years to an extent, like taking it to a level of the power plant. So a lot need to be done, right? I mean, technology might be there, but the other handles are equally important, are probably more important at this point of time. And like you said, it's the amine-based technology which is leading the way. It's globally available. It's the most mature technology which is available for at a scale that we are looking at, especially for capturing for power plants. So yes, there's a long way to go in CCUS. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, as you see the curve, even most of the places, say up to 2030, people don't see real commercial projects. Every country is looking at 2 to 3 projects at the most by 2030. And
absolutely,
if you look at the development cycle, it takes, I mean, these projects like pre-feasibility study took us, of course, because of Corona condition, but it still took about a year to complete. Then you go to the real feasibility study, which will be fairly longer thing, and feed, etc., which will take another 2 years. And then you will go to the cycle of financing it, the cycle of ordering equipment and installing. So it's almost a cycle of 6 to 7 years before the project will actually be of this scale will be put up. So people are really very realistic when they are saying say 2 to 3 plants by next 2030 or so.
Right, you rightly said, but you know, a lot of action is happening in the area of CCUS, at least the carbon capture, storage, right, utilization. These are various tail end thing, right? You know, once you have captured the CO2, do you want to store it? Do you want to utilize it, convert it into a product, or take it to a geological site, cap it? But the capturing part, if you look at it, there are lots of global research that are happening. There are lots of global challenges that are thrown in, right? Because so that you could crowdsource the ideas about capturing the capturing the carbon. So it's a very dynamic field. It is very it is evolving, and it is evolving very fast. Different technology. Like if you look at it 10 years back, or to that matter, even 5 or 6 years back, we were talking about only amine-based technology, but new technologies are coming up. And of course, since they are new, it will take some time. Normally, the cycle is about 10 years for anything to really mature and come to the market. So that way, there are membrane-based technology, electrolyte, and there are so many other technologies that are coming up that need to be checked. but it is accelerating very fast. The CCUS sector is accelerating very fast. Yeah.
True. It's a very, very extremely dynamic group, dynamic thing. And so that part I really I agree with you completely. And it is something that everybody has to look at it. And so the key today is to be really be active and map the technologies as they are evolving.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, I mean, of course, so that's the key basically, to keep on mapping and keep on evolving yourself also every year or two to see exactly where the technology has reached, what is the cost that is coming down. And suddenly there are breakthroughs like say this MIT research on electrochemical things, those kind of things. They are very interesting. Just like electrostatic precipitator, they are saying we will be able to capture CO2 also out of, so which is very exciting.
And how the government policies are coming up, right? What kind of incentives we are putting into place? Because 10 years back, solar wasn't the way we are looking at solar today.
True.
It is because of all the push that solar has, the solar has got, all the hand-holding that solar received. So you really don't know, because it's not just technology, it's how the policies are coming up. And I think with India saying that we want to, not phase out, but phase down coal, and we have climate target. So giving all this thing, I'm very confident that CCUS or CCS, whatever we call it, but carbon capture will play a very major role in Indian power sector, because coal is certainly not going to go anywhere for next 30 years is what the minister is claiming, but certainly 50 years, 100 years, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yes, so we have to, if we talk about Indian context, because we are the third biggest in terms of our energy production,
right,
electrical grid capacity. So I think there is a lot of scope. And given that we have very clearly said that we will be phasing it down, but the way our economies are going, the way our demands are going, and given that we have also made a commitment for climate commitments, CCUS or CCS, whatever we call it, will certainly play a very major role in Indian energy sector.
True. No, and the hard to abate sector, that is something one needs to also.
Absolutely.
It is actually a lower, some of them there are lower hanging fruits available.
Low hanging fruits, yes.
And say like the one we saw in refinery sector or petrochemical sector, that was really interesting. I mean, it's almost 90-95% pure CO2 is available and they're simply venting it.
Venting it, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely right. And we talked about the carbon market and all. So and these are very much there on the table. All these discussions, all the government who have made climate commitments are discussing. It's just that we're trying to take lesson from others and waiting for someone to take the first step so that you could learn from their experience. But all the actions certainly will come up in next 2 to 3 years time. We will be seeing that how the markets are evolving, how the carbon market come into existence, because this COP as well, there was a lot of push about the climate thing, the climate market, sorry, the carbon market, if that could be materialized. So let's see how things are evolving. They're talking about international grids where you can take it from one continent to other. So all those discussions are happening, something that we couldn't even think of 5 or 6 years back are now being part of all these big climate discussions, right? So CCUS and how you could take it, if there is a site available in some other part of the world, can we take the carbon there? So all those things are, at least we have started discussing it. And the first step for any action is to start the discussion. So yes, with these words, I would thank Mr. Mehta for this wonderful talk. Yours, we kind of summarized it, lots of discussion we had on technology, various options, how to do it, hands-on. But one thing which is very important is, all said and done, where is the finance? So yes, so thank you for covering that. And we look forward to hear more from you. Thank you for taking time out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Dear participants, we have come to an end of our coursework. I will give, let's take a quick 15 minutes break and come back and do the concluding part of it. We would like to hear from you. So please switch on your cameras, 15 minutes time to dress yourself well. We are going to capture you in video as well and put it on our website. So that's on a lighter note, but we would certainly like to hear from you. Your opinion, what is it that you learned? What is your opinion? What are your suggestions by which we can make it better next time when we come back with this course in a new form? We would love to hear it from you. So can we take a 15 minutes break and come back again? Maybe for another half an hour, and then we will conclude the session. So let's take a 15 minutes break and join back. Thank you.
Dear participants, we have shared a feedback form with you in the chat box. Whosoever has not filled the feedback form, we request you to kindly please fill it today. Thank you.